Izuku seemed to brush off the comments as Kirishima only looked more puzzled. Still wandering around, I guess. And like that, Bakugo seemed to shut up. It had been a new tactic Izuku picked up while in high school. Bakugo could go off on a potty-mouthed tangent and Izuku would reply as if he were being a normal human being. Sometimes it stopped Bakugo's incessant yelling and sometimes it didn't, but at least Izuku stopped taking it to heart. He viewed it more like a proper challenge than the condescending barking it often was. Right now, it seemed to be keeping Bakugo's blood pressure in check. Izuku responded to Kirishima's confused glances between the two rivals. Out of high school I got a freelance position with the police department, Kirishima. I've been all over the country working with different departments and heroes. That's what Kachan means. That's so cool, Hiroshima gushed. And I bet you've already filled in at least 8 nerd books all about those heroes, Bakugo jabbed with a condescending smirk. Actually, it's more like 10, Izuku expertly deflected. Ochako giggled silently into her drink. Bakugo had to snicker as well. Damn, why am I not surprised you still do that shit, ya nerd? Hiroshima poked Bakugo's shoulder with the spout of his beer bottle. Don't you know? Midoriya's real quirk is strategy. He can remember every little thing about anyone and use it against them. Izuku became visibly flush at the notion and whined. Well, not. But Bakugo had already grown bored of the interaction and started walking back to the TV where Siro and Kaminari were playing some video game. Whatever. Hiroshima went to follow him, then turned around with an excited grin back to Izuku. It's good to see ya. Man, come join us for some gaming like old times, yeah. Izuku nodded. Yeah, definitely. He and Kirishima parted as Izuku made his way to the bar, no doubt because Iida and Todoroki were still conversing with Momo. Ochako felt her body tense up as Izuku's eyes met hers and he stopped right in front of her, his smile growing soft. Right, he was also coming over because she was sitting there, too, and they had been best friends at some point or other. Hey, Uraraka, how have you been? It was a simple statement, albeit one she should have guessed would be the first thing he said to her, but she felt her throat awkwardly constrict. It had been months since that voice had addressed her personally, and memories of her body's reactions to it through the television speakers just a week or two ago made this all the more difficult. She had known about Momo's party for a long time, but never once thought that Izuku would be there. It hadn't occurred to her. Izuku hadn't existed for months, and only Deku visited her through a screen and as a name printed in ink upon the hero rankings list. She hadn't had time to process or plan what she could possibly say to him should he really stand before her as flesh and blood. Oh, well, she tried looking down at the floor, away from his questioning gaze, trying to come up with an answer. The truth was out of the question, but a lie would cut this interaction short. The whole circumstance was damning. Fortunately, as her head and heart argued with her mouth to just say something, Iida saved the day as he stomped over in excitement. Midoriya, just like he had done to Ochako, Iida wrapped his arms around Izuku in a bear hug that would have surely squeezed the life out of him had he been a scrawnier man. We haven't spoken in eons. How have you been? How is police work treating you? Great, great, Iida. Izuku choked as Iida set him down in front of the rest of their friends. Mina and Todoroki silently waved in greeting, but Momo sat her wine glass down on the polished wood counter and put her hands to her hips. Yes, where have you been? Well, I travel a lot for work. Wherever they need me for a tough case, I get transferred, Izuku informed her, not seeming to understand the trouble he was in. Momo sighed and ordered, "You need to stay in better contact. You were the most difficult one to get to come to this reunion." "Is that so?" Todoroki asked in surprise. "I don't even pick up my phone." Momo shook her head hopelessly and dropped it into her hand. Everyone was difficult, and although it was no surprise that the quiet, aloof Todoroki wouldn't bother to pick up a phone, it was downright shocking that the affable Izuku didn't. "Yes, seriously," Momo answered, squeezing the bridge of her nose. "At least you have a permanent address I can send letters to. And you open those." "You have no permanent address?" Mina asked as she cradled her chin in her hands, her elbows resting on the counter. "What about a P.O. box? You guys don't understand. I'm really all over the place." Izuku tried again. "I mean, I would make a P.O. box, but I'm really not in any one place for too long. If I make one, I may not get to it really ever. All my mail still goes to my mom's apartment and then I get all the mail when I visit her. I've really considered all of that and I've been meaning to call or something, but I get home at crazy hours and I don't want to be bothering anyone on a day off or." He was rambling, struggling to address their complaints. Like Ochako, it seemed that he was expecting this sort of interrogation for his shoddy communication skills. "At least you still make time for your mother," Momo said quietly as she took another sip from her glass. "But we want to hear from you, too." She had said that just a bit too loud, a bit too stressed, the alcohol having made its presence known again. And Bakugo answered it from the corner with the TV, "Speak for yourself. Don't call me Deku. You got it, Kachan. At least there's someone I haven't let down," Izuku answered as if scripted. Bakugo grumbled audibly. Momo breathed a defeated sigh and straightened her back. Ochako felt the same way. What could really be done? In the end, they didn't have much sway in the way Izuku did things. They didn't really have any right to demand he stay in better contact, although it seemed easier now to ask as it appeared he generally cared. Ochako had never thought for a moment he didn't care, but surely his hero work was his top priority, as it was for all of them. Distractingly so. "I said this before you arrived, but I think it's something you really need to hear," Momo said, sitting straight with a focus and air of wisdom the girl was known for back in the day. "You're human." You don't have to work so much that you can't call your friends. Yeah, I see you on the news all the time. It's like you don't sleep, Mina commented. I sleep, sometimes, but I've been on missions that required I be awake for more than 24 hours. Izuku scratched the back of his head. He knew that didn't help his case any. I like the work, honestly. But yeah, it's been pretty lonely. Iida piped up. Then from here on out, might we make a promise? To stay in better contact, and agree now that there is no bad time to call. I'll drink to that. Ochako lifted her glass, now only half empty of its tropical blue elixir. She turned sheepishly to Izuku, hoping that Ida's pact made sense to him. He stood for a moment as the rest of their friends lifted their glasses one by one. It wasn't in a way that seemed as though he was considering if this promise was worth his time. No, it was more like he was considering if it was a promise he could keep. He caught her eyes, and this time Ochako kept them locked, and smiled as a prompt for him to answer. He cracked a grin. I'd drink to it, but I don't have a drink, Izuku answered, shrugging. Iida laughed, throwing an arm around Izuku's shoulders, taking that as an affirmation of the pact. Mina jumped up at this. Oh, let me make you this. It's what I'm drinking, she said, bubbly and excited to get someone else hooked on her new favorite concoction. Nothing too heavy, Izuku warned, leaning against the counter and looking down to the pink girl crouched behind it. The glass bottles clinked as Mina shuffled through looking for the right ingredients. Ochako watched as Izuku struggled with Mina, who insisted that this was a party and he needed to relax. She poured him something or other that looked too transparent to be light, and she giggled along with Momo as Izuku, as accommodating as he was, took the shot against his better judgment. His face contorted with the drink's dry sting, complaining to Mina that she certainly just served him rubbing alcohol. He was too cute like this, and Ochako found herself feeling warm at this reconnection. Their days in high school had been like this: one part responsibility, two parts shenanigans. The adversity in their world hadn't taken away their time for just being kids. Granted, they weren't kids anymore, but still, wasn't there more time for this? For something more constant. The relief she had felt before was fading now. She hadn't said much more than two words to Izuku or really anyone, and now they were drifting apart to opposite sides of the room. Izuku refused Mina's special mix and headed toward the TV where Kirishima and Kaminari shouted in excitement for him to join them in some virtual fun. Meanwhile, Iida had gotten into a long-winded conversation with Shoji and Tokiyami about current events in their shared workspaces. Something about a villain, clues, the office, and long after hours. Todoroki stood off to the side of them, listening but seeming quite content in his quiet sphere of influence, swishing around his scotch in bemusement of the world around him. Momo was greeting Kyoka Jiro, who was kicking Mina out from behind the counter as official bartender, as Suyu tried to reason that Mina ought to give Kyoka a chance at it. In the far corner where Izuku had disappeared, Bakugo stood on the sidelines shouting fiercely at Kirishima every time he made a mistake, while Siro and Mineta shouted, booed, and whined at every ridiculous mishap on screen. The whole room and its occupants seemed to be moving like a video played at 2 times speed as Ochako sat completely paused. Everyone was moving. The noise and voices from either end of the room were blurring together into white noise until she couldn't differentiate them as separate things anymore. Her eyes lazily rested back to Izuku as he concentrated on his character on screen. He seemed so out of reach again. This had been another missed shot, it seemed. Her heart sank. The sound of a liquid falling into a thick glass came into focus again, and Kyoka's low, concerned voice penetrated Ochako's dizzying thoughts. You okay over there? You look like you're drinking to forget. How do you figure that? Toru Hagakuri's voice asked from the left. Ochako hadn't even noticed the invisible girl had taken the stool right next to her. A cute, ruffled tank top with blue jean shorts hovered in the shape of a young woman next to her, as the bangles, around where Ochako assumed Toru's wrists were, jingled as she moved her arms. She barely drank any of it. I've been helping my dad out at his new rock bar, Kyoka informed the rest of the girls as she looked down at her own drink. It's amazing how well you can tell someone's feelings just by how and what they're drinking. Oh, yeah. Mina leaned over the counter in excitement, her stool leaning forward on only two legs. Tell my fortune, Kyoka. How am I feeling? Kyoka, tell my fortune, Kyoka. How am I feeling? Kyoka gave her an amused side glance, pointed an earphone jack at the pink girl and said, "You're just a party animal. You're here to partake in Momo's free liquor and have a good time with us." Damn, she's good, Ochako heard Mina whisper in shock as she sat back onto her stool. But when people want to forget, like a breakup or something bad that just happened, they'll throw back shot after shot real quick. Like they're not even tasting it, Kyoka explained as she twirled one of her earphone jacks. But, if it's something they want to forget from a long time ago, some people kinda just nurse one drink absently like they don't know why they ordered it. Kyoka's eyes playfully zeroed in on Ochako, although she seemed a bit concerned as well. Ochako stiffened. Was she really that obvious? Well, Mina made me this, Ochako tried, looking down at the half-empty glass in her hands. You said you liked it. Mina whined in response. I do. Suyu brought a long finger to her lip and murmured a bit too loud. Well, if that's true, then Ochako also dates to forget. Ochako's face dropped in shock. Her eyes became large, and a lump in her throat manifested, making her incapable of choking out much more than Sue. Sorry, Ochako. I didn't mean to say it out loud, but maybe it would be best to discuss it with the other girls. There hasn't been much I could do for you. Ooh, what's going on? Are you okay? I'm fine. Ochako squeaked. You're not fine, Kyoka stated. A jack pointed right at Ochako. She then continued thoughtfully, tapping a finger on her chin. drinking and dating to forget. She, ro- she rolled her eyes with a smirk, as if thinking hard about this. Midoriya, I hazard a guess. Ochako felt her cheeks get red hot and her spirit left her body. By third year, they all knew, not just Suyu. As much as she had been keeping her feelings caged like a frenzied animal, it was hard to hide for very long. Mina had guessed it first. After Ochako had made the mistake of admitting to the girls that her heart had been stirred up for some time, Mina had been on a mission to find out who was stirring the pot. And it hadn't been difficult. Ochako still remained very close friends with the object of her affections, and she guessed any subconscious staring, pain, and closeness just made it too obvious. Mina was a good friend though, and never blabbed about it, although she could barely curb her enthusiasm. Same as right now, the pink girl bounced up and down with an abnormally large grin, stifling her giddiness. As much as the pink diva didn't consider any of the boys dating material for one flaw or another, she had found it unbearably adorable that her friend had fallen for one of them despite it. The other three girls only found out because Ochako decided to tell them during a night of secret sharing. She immediately regretted it at that moment. Mina and Toru had become the giggling brigade, and Ochako could only thank the stars above that Izuku was as dense as he was not to notice the increased attention. Questions inundated her until graduation. Questions like, why don't you just tell him already? Toru whined in the present day, shaking her arms in frustration, the bangles clinking rapidly. The question came among more chatter from Mina, Kyoka sighing and shaking her head, Suyu pleading with them to wait for Ochako, and Momo asking for them to keep their voices low. Todoroki and Ida were still in earshot. Everyone just. Ochako started with a raised voice, built up into nothing as she slouched back into her drink and finished with a mousy, shut up. All right, all right, let's calm down everyone, Kyoko ordered. But really, Toru said in a calmer, quieter voice. Can't say it'd be a distraction anymore. We're not in school. It's not that simple, Ochako argued weakly from her glass. There was a collective sigh from the rest of the girls. It could be simple, if you let it, Toru continued on. Tonight's a brand new opportunity. I suppose. Ochako made it sound like she actually considered the sentiment. She knew Toru meant well. They all meant well. But things were even more different and complicated now. She managed to steer the conversation to other things, namely hero work, something Uravity had a handle on. Just like that, the spotlight faded off her, and the other girls were talking support items, villains, and glory. Ochako made sure to perk up and engage, even if it was the last thing on her mind. After a good half hour of banter, she excused herself to the bathroom. After a good half hour of banter, she excused herself to the bathroom, and was thankful as Mina announced it was time to tap a kidney. She'd rather them all imagine that than her crying, which, she wasn't going to do either. Just a splash. She wasn't going to do either. Just a splash to the face and a reset was what she needed. To pull out in order to go back in with a better, clean mindset. She needed to tell herself that things were going to be okay now. She would start texting Iida again, going to dinner with the girls, calling Izuku. As she headed down the corridor to the nearest bathroom, a familiar, flamboyant voice filled her ears. Oh, Uraraka, is that you? Yuga Aoyama was approaching from the bathroom. Ochako couldn't remember when he had arrived to the party. What's with the long face? He asked, genuine concern hiding somewhere in his permanent smile and among the sparkles. You know. Oh, just. Ochako started her explanation, but Aoyama was too quick. Brooding about your interaction with Midoriya. Asterisk. She couldn't tell if he was teasing her or was just better at guessing these things than even Mina. After all, Aoyama knew about Ochako's feelings before even Ochako had. Just as those feelings were kindling in their first year, Aoyama pointed them out to Ochako during their joint exam against 13. Since that moment, he had known, but never said anything about it again. Since that moment, he had known, but never said anything about it again. He seemed to have just prided himself in spreading the embers around and left Ochako alone to deal with the wildfire that ignited afterward. What the heck? Why does everyone know? Ochako whined. Am I that easy to read? We. Asterisk. Ochako grumbled. But Aoyama, now done teasing her, gently put his hands up and spoke softly. Now, really, what's troubling you, dear? Asterisk. Ochako had crossed her arms over her chest, as if now trying harder to resist any more intrusions. But as close as they weren't, there was something about Aoyama she could always trust. After all, he had never spoken again about his knowledge of her budding affections for Izuku. Even when he befriended the boy in question, no hints were ever dropped as a courtesy to her, and Ochako had appreciated it. Aoyama seemed to know Aoyama seemed to know that this was something she had to do on her own terms. Ochako sighed, but said sternly, You weren't wrong. Ah. Aoyama nodded quickly. I did see the whole debacle. Asterisk. Yeah, Ochako murmured, squeezing her arms and looking away from the sparkling man. I just don't know about saying anything tonight like all the girls want me to. What? Asterisk. Aoyama stammered. No number, no, 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 that's ridiculous. Asterisk. Ochako finally loosened. Here was someone who gets it. Thank you. We haven't spoken in so long. It just doesn't seem right. We, Aoyama agreed. Granted, you probably should have done all your confessing at graduation. That was probably your best opportunity. Asterisk. Wasn't it? Only in hindsight, though. At the time, it still seemed so scary. She had been missing opportunities left and right for years, arguing that those times were just not right. Promises of broken friendship, awkwardness, and distractions littered her excuses when she found herself never committing. She just loved him too much. Somewhere down the line, his aspirations became just as important to her as her own dreams. She wanted to be close to him, wanted to watch his dreams come true, and confessing, well, it ran the risk of destroying all that. And if that was so, ran the risk of destroying all that. And if that was so, then when would have been a good time? Probably never. So, she had watched him disappear. After graduation, things only got more difficult. She sullenly convinced herself that, even if she had told him, it wouldn't have kept him close to her. He still would have taken the job with the police, running himself thin, and still not having time for this brand of nonsense, just as Ochako always predicted. That was a self-fulfilling prophecy though, wasn't it? Because here she had done nothing and gotten that same result. Seeing her brow furrow in building anxiety, Aoyama hummed, questioning what could be taking her so long to continue their conversation. Instead, he continued. Nevertheless, he stated, I don't agree this is a good opportunity. No, it just won't do you need to start again. Paris ne cest pas fait en un jour. Asterisk. So, what should I do? Ochako asked. She wasn't looking for advice, but instead saw the twinkle in his eye that signified something up his sleeve and she was too curious to ignore it. Tell you what, he responded with a flip of his luscious blonde locks. Find yourself on the balcony in exactly 10 minutes. Asterisk. What are you going to do? Ochako squinted her eyes, becoming defensive and immediately coming to the conclusion that his end was the same as Mina's and Toru's, prompt her to confess. I know you have no reason to, but trust me, Aoyama said, still confident and sure. He walked off with a parting, petit a petit, law of fate son nid. Asterisk. Ochako didn't know what that meant, but before she could ask, he was gone like a shadow in the light. She stood in the hallway, dumbfounded and not really sure what to do with herself. Sure, she could follow along with Aoyama's schemes or she could ignore it and Sure, she could follow along with Aoyama's schemes or she could ignore it and figure it out on her own. After all, this was her issue. Why so many people wanted to be involved with it was beyond her. Then again, what did then again, what did she have to lose? Her friendship with Izuku was already fading into oblivion as it was. The worst that could happen would be more of the same. Best case scenario, she could rekindle the friendship into something more fortified against the elements of hero life. At the very least, she could be close to him again, even if it wasn't in the romantic sense. So, she found herself on the balcony, exactly 10 minutes from her conversation with Aoyama, as instructed. The dark had set itself in for the night hours ago. The only light illuminating the gorgeous stone balcony was from the lamps and chandeliers back inside. Despite the tall windows, she felt as though the balcony was as private as one could get. Even with the party raging on behind the glass, it was quiet. She leaned against the railing with her arms folded, her elbows becoming cool from the stone. The 10 minutes passed, and then another 5, and another 5. A cool breeze broke the day's unrelenting heat, and for once this summer, she wasn't sweating. All of her worries blew away with the wind and she began to find herself again. Oh, hey, Uraraka. Zen lost. I didn't know you were out here. I thought you would still be with the other girls. It was Izuku, clearly as by Aoyama's design. But what had the clever son of a gun said to get Izuku to come out here if not that Ochako was here and had something to tell him? She glanced inside. The TV where the other boys were playing video games was very close to the windows, but they were all paying attention to the screen, including Aoyama. The blonde matchmaker was sitting pretzel style on the floor with a game controller in his hand, nervously trying to play. Normally, she would have expected someone like Aoyama to sip Merlot the whole night, not play video games. He really had done her a favor. Izuku took the space next to her on the edge of the balcony and leaned against the railing like she was. I know our conversation ended pretty abruptly before. Sorry about that. Oh, don't worry about it. Ochako jumped, shaking her hands, as if to swat his worries away. She had been thankful Ida cut their conversation short then. She hadn't been ready for Izuku. Still, I'd like to hear about how you've been doing, he continued. It's been a while since we spoke. It really has, Ochako sighed, and I've been, fine. Busy, but fine. That's good. I figured things were starting to pick up for you when you started calling me less, he said wistfully. He then caught himself and scratched the back of his head. But, I'm sure that was also my fault. But, I'm sure that was also my fault. Ochako gave him a worried glance and he addressed it. Well, Yaoyarozu was right. I could be better about answering anything. He continued on. It was just so hectic for a while. Every other week I was transferring to a new part of town or a whole new town or going abroad for something or other, but it's no excuse. I had cell service. Before he could ramble again, Ochako shook her head with a smile. Well, I probably could have kept calling even if you didn't answer, but it was getting weird. She was joking, but Izuku clammed up at the notion, turning to her with such guilt, she regretted it immediately. I'm just kidding. It's really okay. Is it, though? He asked, still consumed with guilt. Well, yeah, I know you're busy. I watch you on TV all the time. You do. Ochako caught what she said and her face went red as she remembered exactly what watching news segments featuring him had entailed recently. Nevertheless, she decided to run with it. Yeah. How else am I supposed to know how you're doing? His anxiety returned. So, you were upset I didn't answer the phone. I'm really sorry. Ochako put her hands up to calm him. No, no, it really is okay, Deku. Honest, I forgive you. If you say so, Izuku sighed in unsure relief. They turned to face the blackness beyond the house again, leaning on the railing just an inch apart. A moment swept by, then another. Her cheeks still hadn't cooled, and she refused to look in his direction again, although she was certain he was also still staring into the abyss. It was awkward, but it was necessary, Ochako told herself. No matter what the end game was here, at the end of the day, she had missed her friend dearly. The fact that said friend also summoned romantic feelings in her was beyond the point. When the silence became too much to bear, Ochako decided any conversation was better than none. After all, Aoyama wasn't feigning a love for video games for nothing. Well, to answer your questions, work has been pretty interesting and exhausting, Ochako interjected into the silence. Izuku seemed to perk up at the sound of her voice. At least that's what she felt from an inch away. We've been dealing with a lot of recovery missions lately, she elaborated. The image of the severed hand raced across her mind and she winced. That must be rough. I'm sorry, Izuku said, imparting his condolences in a low, soothing tone that sent shivers down her spine. It's from the downed apartment buildings, right? Ochako nodded, staring off into the night. That actually reminds me about what I wanted to tell you before Ida dragged me away, Izuku said thoughtfully. I was transferred to your neck of the woods to work on that case. Ochako whipped her head around with wide, disbelieving eyes. All this time he had been nothing more than a memory. Now, all that would change. He'd be closer. So close they could actually keep this friendship going longer than this night. Of course, he was extremely close now, and when she turned towards him, the inch between them became so much more reduced that she could see the more muted freckles on his nose in this dim light. They blinked in unison before realizing the intimacy of the limited space between them. Turning away quickly, they re-established the friendly boundary once more in a frenzy. Ochako felt the perpetually rosy spots on her cheeks heat up anew. It took a hell of a lot of self-discipline, she figured, on her part, to continually douse this inferno welling up from her heart. Had she been a weaker woman, she probably would have just said, "Screw it," and blamed it on the alcohol as she distanced the tiny gap that had been between their lips moments ago. Would have dug her fingers into his fluffy hair and pressed her body against his. Would have kept coming back for more from his lips as their breathing became strained and hands wandered. Her heart sped up at these wild suggestions, the fantasy a recurring chaser to his image. It was all she could do to appease herself in private. But now, it was awkward, mortifying. Even, and she was glad no one had a mind reading quirk. Still, this damn blush was telling, even in the dark. From what she could gather, though, he hadn't noticed. His voice wavered as he explained, trying to fill in the awkward, damning silence. Yeah, I thought the transfer took up a lot of my time. That's why Yaoyarozu was mad I wasn't. I didn't think I would make it to this tonight. I only got the assignment yesterday. Another second of silence. The awkwardness from before continued to haunt them like a miserable ghost. Well, I'm glad you made time in the end, Ochako commented, still without looking at him, still with hot cheeks. Why, yeah, me too. His hands were fidgeting and he continued on. I thought, or figured. We'll be living close by each other. Maybe we could see each other more. Maybe grab lunch, or something, if you want and you have time. I'm not expecting anything. Ing. For you to go out of your way. You're really busy and I am too. I just thought. When he started to talk too much, her awkwardness transformed into relaxed endearment. She watched him struggle a little while longer while holding in a laugh. His rambling and mumbling was something she expected from him. and she didn't even know why she liked it so much. Where other people found it strange, she knew he needed it to think. Like having a full conversation with himself just got the cogs moving. And when he was done, the product was an adroit strategy no one but Deku could come up with. But it backfired sometimes, like now when his kindness and consideration for her limited personal time was getting in the way of asking his friend to lunch once while he was in town. At least that's what she perceived. Ochako giggled, and finally cut him off for his own health. I'll definitely fit you in somewhere. He visibly loosened and smiled brightly. Their reconnection was complete. Friendship saved. Right. Ochako felt like she could look him in the eyes again, and for the next blissful moment, she didn't realize she was staring. Things became effortless again, like when they were in high school. Sure, there were times when the awkwardness between them flared up, but it hadn't stopped them from being together, as friends. Maybe Toru and Mina had been right. Friends. Maybe Toru and Mina had been right. Maybe tonight was as good as any other to just let the truth come out. Her voice was shaky, but for once her resolve was as strong as the feelings she was about to unveil. She looked down, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. Hey, Deku. Yeah, he answered cluelessly. Oh, Midoriya tilde asterisk. Aoyama's voice came crashing in from the open door. Ochako had almost Ochako had almost forgotten that other people existed. Hey, Aoyama, you done playing? In fact, Bakugo would like a challenge, now asterisk. Izuku rolled his eyes with a smirk. Sounds serious. I guess I'll head in then. I'll text you Monday about lunch. Ochako nodded, and just like an apparition, he was gone. Ochako was left standing at the edge of the balcony alone again, and Aoyama took Izuku's place next to her holding his cheeks in sparkling glee. Oh my. A lunch date for Mon Amy Chansu's. Asterisk. Aoyama. You came at the worst time. I was about to. I was gonna do it. Aoyama shook his head and booped her on the nose. You were not supposed to do that. Good thing I intervened. Asterisk. Quote dot. Of course. You did it on purpose. Of course. This is no setting for confessions. Not unless you're inebriated. Asterisk. But Mina and Toru are selfish. They want to witness you confess and kiss and become an item, but it's not any of their business. You need a private setting. Asterisk. Ochako threw up her arms. This felt private, and I was here to remind you it's not asterisk. Then where in this overcrowded city? I see. Among the clouds. Then. Asterisk. Now I know you're crazy. Aoyama sighed and moved a shiny blonde lock of hair from his face. Aoyama sighed and moved a shiny blonde lock of hair from his face only for it to fall exactly where it had been. Since year one, you always knew when the time wasn't right. Give yourself some credit to know when the time is right. And with that, and with that, he was done with her, disappearing back into the party through the immense open doors, never to be seen again. Ochako looked back to the party and sighed. Everyone was here now. Despite the quiet that enveloped her out here on the balcony, it was transparent. Those tall, opulent windows wouldn't have hidden the aftermath of her spilled guts. She made peace with what transpired and ambled her way back inside. Whether Izuku remembered or not, she committed to texting him as promised and lunch would happen. She hoped. Note. What is Aoyama saying? We equals yes opportunité equals opportunity Paris ne cest pas fait en un jour. Equals Paris was not made in a day. Petite a petite. Law of fate son nid. Petit a petit. Law of fate sun nid. Equals little by little. The bird builds its nest. A French saying that means that every little action will get you closer to your goal. I felt it made a lot of sense for what Aoyama's role was in this chapter. Mon ami chances equals my lucky friend. Thanks to a great reader for catching my previous mistake. I'm surprised that's all I got wrong. Where stories live. Discover now.